It's hot in this apartment. Hence the unbuttoning of the shirt. We're getting serious, guys. Welcome back to AURAM'S FORUM, part 2 of the relaunch saga, as I will henceforth refer to it. Part 2 of 3, so henceforth means just in this episode and the next one. Last time we talked about Marvel Legacy and how Marvel handles its relaunches. We also kind of teased a lot of what we're talking about in this episode, which is DC Rebirth and why it's great. So, we're going to talk about DC Rebirth, so I'm going to put my water down and then we're going to get into it. Okay, so, just a quick little summary of what DC Rebirth is and how we got to it. In 2011, DC decided that it was time for another crisis, which we'll talk about in the next episode. But the crisis that they decided they wanted to do was kind of the biggest crisis that they've had since 1985 with Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it was called Flashpoint. What Flashpoint was a Flash story where he ran so fast that he slipped on a banana peel and broke the world. I'm not even kidding, that's the story. Okay, no, I'm kidding, that's not the story. What did happen, though, was Flash decided that he wanted to stop his mother from dying, because of course. So he ran back in time, stopped his mommy from dying, but this created an alternate timeline where shit hit the fan. You've got Aquaman battling the Amazonians, it's the Atlanteans versus the Amazons, and they're going clashing head to head for land, some shit. I think Diana tried to kill Mara or something, or did kill Mara, and I don't know, it's unimportant. Bruce Wayne's dad, Thomas Wayne is the Batman, and his mommy is the Joker, because Bruce died instead of his parents dying. You've got Superman, who's locked in a small government home, and he's all tiny. He's all sad because he doesn't have any exposure to the sun. I think they actually are exposing him to red sun radiation, which makes sense. Because otherwise, why would he be all shriveled? He wasn't all shriveled on Krypton. They got a red... Wait, hold on. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense, now that I think about it. Did they just not feed him? Because people on Krypton aren't all shriveled. People on Krypton are built, and they're under a red sun. They just don't have powers. What the... I'm calling you out, Flashpoint writer. Jeff Johns, potentially, I'm not sure. Anyway, the end of the story, Barry realizes that he fucked up. He gets his powers back with the help of Thomas Wayne. Reverse Flash, because he's Reverse Flash, comes on the scene and he's like, "Who's the villain now, Barry?" And I don't think maybe he does say that. He says that in the show. It's not important. Flash fixes everything. He runs back, or he runs so fast that he trips on a timeline, and Pandora, who is a character that nobody liked that was created for this event, is like, "Things have changed. All 3 timelines are converging into one," and by that she meant the DC universe, the Vertigo universe, and the Wildstorm universe are all being put together into what was then known as the New 52 universe, which is essentially just it's another new timeline, kind of. Basically, the multiverse was rebooted, to an extent. So there were characters like Superman, who were pretty much all rebooted from the start, where, I mean, certain things were just told the same way, but essentially these characters were taken back to day one, except for characters like Batman and Green Lantern, who had their histories just condensed into a 5-year time period. But now we would come to know that with DC Rebirth and just storylines continuing, that the universe wasn't really rebooted. Reality was just fucked with by seemingly Dr. Manhattan to kind of just change these heroes and take 5 years away from them to weaken them. For something that, at the time of this recording, I don't know what is. Who's to say? Maybe they're gonna kill him. Maybe they're just playing ball. Maybe Dr. Manhattan got bored one day and was like, "I want a world with superheroes, but for real this time." and then you made the DC universe. Wouldn't that be crazy? I hope that's not the answer, because that'd be real strange. But, point is, DC had the New 52, and it was met with critically very high praise, with, well, maybe not critically, but it was money-wise, monetarily speaking, it was incredibly good for DC. They relaunched with new number ones coming out over like the next year in phases. I think every month they released a new phase of number ones, and they were all under this New 52 brand with just shiny new number ones, with new stories being told with these characters, which DC hadn't done a lot, in contrast to Marvel, who did do it a lot. And you just had these pretty great, sometimes mediocre stories that were being told, and people really, they ate it up. New readers were coming in, old readers, as far as I know, were pretty angry, but they got over it, because the stories that were being told were good. Some of them, again, not everything was perfect, but there were some good stuff. But then, a couple years go by, we have, like, the Trinity War, which is pretty bad. A couple other minor events happen here and there, and then we lead into Convergence, which people like to discount as the worst event ever, which I agree with. It's awful, but it did actually do some good things for the DC universe, in that it changed the multiverse, essentially, where before Convergence, the New 52 multiverse was just 52 worlds, whatever. It's just the new 52, referring to the new 52 Earths. Also referring to the 52 books, and that DC uses that number a lot. I made a video about it on this channel and on NerdSync. Go check it out. But the New 52 happened, and you had 52 worlds, and then Convergence happened, and they were like, hey, fuck that, everything's canon now. Literally all of it. So, pre-Flashpoint boys, they're real, which that kind of got retconned with Rebirth, but we'll talk about that in a minute. You got, like, the Batman 66 series, that's on a universe somewhere. You just had an infinite possibilities were happening at this point. And that's kind of how it was pre-Flashpoint, but not really. It kind of retconned the multiverse map that we all know about, the big Grant Morrison multiverse map thing that came out with Multiversity. Somewhat retconned it, not really, because you still have those 52 worlds are still there, but there's more. So there's that. But a lot of people were like, Convergence is garbage, DC's going down the drain. And DC was like, well, fuck you, guy. We're gonna make things even worse. So they decided that they wanted to launch this initiative that, to this day, I still don't really understand what the hell they were thinking. I mean, it kind of makes sense. I'll tell you what it is before I start talking about it. It was called DCU, not the letter U, but like the word U, like you there, nah. And essentially, their goal with it was to have books just tell stories, just have creators tell their stories regardless of continuity and what's going on anywhere. So, kind of going back on their very long-running shared universe that they've touted since even before the 1985 New Earth Crisis on Infinite Earths world. And the problem was, people just got A, really confused, and B, the books coming out of it were not great. So you had, the biggest example I can think of is in the mainstay Batman title, you had Jim Gordon being Batman, and Bruce Wayne basically not knowing who he is, I think, at this point. I can't remember if he gave up being Batman, or if he was in that weird fugue state where he did not remember that he was Batman. But you had that, and then at the same time in the Justice League book, you had Bruce Wayne being Batman on the Justice League. So, and that was happening at the same time, and they were just like, DC fuck you, basically. continuity doesn't matter, who cares, meh. Continuity, barely know her, get it out of here. But people got real angry because it was bad, and it was kind of piggybacking on what Convergence decided that they wanted to do with the every universe is real, who cares. So then they took that a step further and were like, every story is real, who cares, continuity doesn't matter, who cares. But it's just, you can't go back on like a 70-year-old shared universe that has all this history and rich history between these characters and be like, who fucking cares? If you want to tell stories where continuity doesn't matter, you have a brand called Elseworlds that you can tell that story in. Just do that. American Alien is a good example of that. I feel like if that came out, it was like an Elseworlds Superman story, basically. If American Alien came out during the DCU time, I don't think it did, but if it did, they would have been like, it's in continuity. I mean, it's in canon, but it's not in continuity, because continuity doesn't matter. How confusing is that? It's just real confusing. This isn't about DCU. Anyway, after the huge backlash that DCU had, they like immediately dropped that brand and were just like, stories. Who needs DCU? It's unimportant. Another agenda that they had with DCU was to fix a problem that people had with the New 52, which was like every book was grungy and looked the same. So with DCU, they were like, Bizarro gets a book, Black Canary is drawn in like a really stylized style and stuff like that. But then there was this weird fugue state where they dropped the DCU title because it got so much negative reputation. And they were just sitting. They were just like, we're just going to put our books out and ramp up to Rebirth. And that's what they did. And it worked out pretty well. So now we're at, like, I think a year or two ago. And DC Rebirth is coming out. And people are loving it. The DC Rebirth One-Shot hits the stands. Everything is being sold for $2.99, which is incredible, which is something that Marvel is bad about. They sell their books for way too much. This 80-page one-shot was $3. Pick it up. Every single book is $2.99. Great, cool, rad thing. Everything is under the DC Rebirth title. You got new number ones coming out. You got great new creative teams being put on storylines. They did this incredible live stream to promote their new books by bringing out all of the creative teams for each book and character, essentially, each like mythos. Like they would bring out all the Batman creators and they let them talk about their book and promote it. They promoted everything heavily on Twitter. They did everything that Marvel has or should be doing with Rebirth. So yeah, the Rebirth One-Shot came out and it was met by fans and by critics as a great achievement for DC, especially facing the recent controversy with Convergence and DCU. Basically what happened in it is old pre-Flashpoint Wally West comes like out of the Speed Force or out of somewhere, and he's taking like a trip through the DC universe and seeing all these things that have changed or are different, and he's commenting on how things are not right. Something's wrong here. Something is missing. And he goes through and starts to realize that things are coming back and certain things are good, but it's slow. And the amount that's bad is outweighing the amount that's good. And he comes to the conclusion that the thing that's missing in the DC universe is love. Which I kind of hate that as the answer. But that's obviously not the canon answer. That's just what the conclusion that Wally came to. And it was very touching in the one shot. But he goes around trying to find like an anchor to this world, to the new world. And he eventually lands on Barry Allen. And Barry Allen is like, who are you? I don't remember you. And then right when Wally's about to be taken back into wherever he was trying to get out of, Barry realizes that that's Wally West, and he remembers. And he remembers not everything from the pre-Flashpoint universe, what we now know as just everything before Dr. Manhattan or whoever messed with reality. He doesn't remember everything. He just remembers everything with Wally. So he remembers that there was an original Teen Titans team that Wally was on. He remembers everyone who was related to Wally West. He remembers training Wally and the accident that that happened that created Wally, or gave Wally his powers. So yeah, basically he remembered Wally. It was very touching. He remembered Wally and everything that was related to him. And in the one-shot, you also saw a bunch of other things kind of going back to the way that they were pre-Flashpoint. You've got, like, Aquaman proposing to Mara. You have Ted Kord being a thing again. Not, like, actually being Blue Beetle, but you see Ted Kord again and him making stuff. You've got a bunch of not a bunch, but a couple of the Legion of, I'm mixing ideas here. The JSA. You have a couple members from the JSA who were not present at all in the New 52, the original interpretation that they were the super team in the 40s during World War II. That was nowhere to be found in the New 52. And then you also had a couple characters from the Legion of Superheroes who were also kind of nowhere to be found in the New 52. Just all these, like, these concepts that weren't seen in the New 52 started popping up again with this one-shot. And it was met with high praise across the board. And following this one-shot, they released just good book after good book after good book with new creative teams. Just everyone felt like they were super happy to be working for DC and just doing things in this new world that they've created. You have Tom King on Batman. You've got Sam Humphries on The Flash. Just super good creators writing super good books. And you also have this incredible mystery through line of The Watchmen, where at the end of the DC Universe one-shot, there's kind of, I think it's like the epilogue, where Batman is just kind of diddling around in his cave, and okay, so this is actually something that I missed when I read it the first time, but going back and reading it, it's a real cool moment. When Wally is looking for an anchor throughout the universe, he stops by the Batcave and just kind of flows through it and sees Wally come out, but Batman has no idea who he is. And when he leaves, a speck of, like, his lightning trail hits the side of the Batcave, and what that did, what that was the button, the Watchman pin, going into the Batcave wall, which is super cool. So yeah, Batman, at the end of the issue, picks up the button and is like, the hell's this? And then he starts analyzing it and brings in the Flash and is like, what's going on with this button thing? Slowly over time, you just have this brilliant mystery through line of what the Watchmen's involvement is in Rebirth, and what Dr. Manhattan and this Mr. Oz character have to do with everything that's going on. And it is a very well done event while not being an event, because DC Rebirth is an event. I will say that it's an event. It's an event comic, but it's not the traditional one. It is similar to Dark Reign, where you had something that was overall happening in the universe, your shared universe. In the case of Dark Reign, it was Norman Osborn being the leader of S.H.I.E.L.D., essentially, under calling it Hammer, and that affected certain storylines, but not all the storylines. And in the case of Rebirth, it is Mr. Oz trapping people and Dr. Manhattan doing something. And that's just a through line that is following in all of the books and touches on all of them in either very small ways or very direct ways. And it just depends on the book. Like, Superman in Action Comics has been directly affected by it. The Flash and Batman have been directly affected by it. Titans, Trinity, there are certain books that are directly affected by it. But then you have books like Batgirl and Green Lanterns, which aren't super affected by it. Actually, in the case of Green Lanterns, this is a very good example of using, like, this overarching through-line event that Rebirth is, just to strengthen your story, just taking advantage of it, because there's a storyline in Green Lanterns not Green Lanterns, but Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, where Kyle Rayner is the White Lantern, and I didn't read it, I just remember that this happened through hearsay, but at some point the White Lantern ring is broken into all the rings that make it up, and it shows these people throughout the universe feeling that something has changed. You see, like, Kilowog, not Kilowog, what's his name? Kilowog is the Green Lantern trainer dude. Anyway, the Red Lantern leader, you see him being like, whoa, and then you see the Flash stopping in his tracks and being like, something feels different. And then on the third panel, you see Mr. Oz saying so many questions. So it was just a really cool thing, because at this point, they've set Mr. Oz up to be this hyper-powerful, super secret boy. And just seeing him react to that strengthens that story. And even if you didn't know who that was, it's unimportant. It doesn't affect the overall story in any way. It's just there for those people who are aware of the current state of the DC universe, as opposed to just a mess of DC has fallen prey to this as well, but just a mess that comes with event books that directly affect everything, which I've talked about in the past, where just you got everything tying in, books being canceled, and it's relaunching. That's the thing. So yeah, this is DC Rebirth essentially. I'm in love with it. I feel like most comic fans are. It is how you should do an event book, or just a relaunch in general, because this is a relaunch. It's not a reboot like the New 52 was. It's the closest thing we've gotten since then, because so many things are changing, and so many new number ones have come out. Like, I mean, everything is a new DC Rebirth number one. But the reason people aren't annoyed by it is because it's been a while. It's been at least 5 years since DC did this, instead of like the 1 year that Marvel takes. And they're also just telling so many good stories. Like, that's the thing. Like, going all the way back to the first episode of this series, story matters above everything else. You could do the scummiest move on the planet of relaunching every single year. Like, people would not be as angry at Marvel for relaunching every year if the books they were telling were consistently great, but they're just not. Marvel has great books. They really do. They've got Gwenpool, Secret Empire going on right now, Infamous Iron Man, Invincible Iron Man, they have a lot of good books that are being put out. But the problem is, those are dwarfed by all the mediocre to bad books that they're also putting out. But DC, on the other hand, has pretty much all good books across the line, with a few mediocre books, and really not that many bad books. I've only read one DC Rebirth book that's left a poor taste in my mouth, and that was the first issue of Cyborg, just because I didn't like it. And I think I reviewed it on an episode a while back, but that's the thing. There's just... Rebirth is great. It's how you should do things. Comic companies take note, and I feel like Marvel did take note with Legacy, but again, I'm just worried because of their track record. But who knows, they could come out and be like, this is DC Rebirth for Marvel, enjoy for the next 5 years until we do it again, which is fine. Just don't do it again in 1 year. But yeah, I'm very interested in Rebirth. The through line that's going on, all of the stories that aren't being affected by it are just good as well. Like, I think I'm reading each week I have like 2 or 3 books from DC that I just am super excited to read, because they're just putting out quality. And that's like, I'm not saying 2 of 3 of the books I'm picking up. I'm saying 2 or 3 books I am reading from DC every week, and I'm excited about every single one of them. As opposed to Marvel, where I'm reading like 10 books a week and I'm only excited about like 3 of them. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on DC Rebirth. It's great. It's really good. And this is coming from a person who didn't read DC books until Rebirth. My first DC comic book was Convergence #1. Yeah. So I read the first like couple issues of Convergence and dropped it because it was so bad. And gave it a little bit and was like, okay, well, I'll just read some New 52 books in the meantime while I wait, and then I'll pick up Rebirth when it happens. And I was so on board. So on board. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Rebirth. It's a great time. We could talk about that in the comments, and how DC handled Rebirth and the New 52 stuff, or yell at me about it on Twitter, or the team that edits this, Julian Andrew. Very good time. I'm gonna go die because of this heat. Next time I die inside. We don't do next times on this show. Just go away. Bye-bye.